Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting slowly into the depths of 5 Nights at Freddy's most enduring mysteries, those questions that have haunted the community since the very beginning, the theories that refuse to die no matter how many games are released or how many books expand the universe. This is a journey through speculation and evidence, through confirmed facts and beautiful uncertainty, where every answer seems to birth 3 new questions, and every revelation opens doors to possibilities we hadn't yet imagined. The world of 5 Nights at Freddy's has always thrived on ambiguity. From the moment players first sat down in that security office back in 2014, watching grainy camera feeds of animatronic characters shuffling through darkened pizzeria hallways, the franchise established itself as something different. This wasn't a horror game that would spell everything out for you. There were no convenient exposition dumps, no clear villain monologues explaining their motivations and methods. Instead, Scott Cawthon crafted a narrative told through newspaper clippings glimpsed between nights, through hidden minigames that appeared without warning, through details buried in the environment that you might miss entirely if you weren't paying close attention. This approach to storytelling created something remarkable within the gaming community. 5 Nights at Freddy's became more than just a series of horror games. It transformed into a collaborative puzzle, with millions of players worldwide working together to piece together fragments of truth from shadows and suggestion. The community didn't just play these games, they dissected them, analyzing every pixel, every sound file, every cryptic teaser image Scott posted to his website. Theory crafting became as much a part of the FNaF experience as the jump scares themselves. What makes FNaF theories so captivating is how they exist in this space between complete fabrication and established canon. The best theories aren't wild speculation pulled from thin air. They're carefully constructed arguments built on evidence, drawing connections between details scattered across multiple games, books, and supplementary materials. They acknowledge contradictions while trying to reconcile them. They respect what we know while exploring what we don't. And perhaps most importantly, they recognize that in this franchise, very little is ever truly settled. Even when Scott Cawthon or the current developers at Steelwool Studios seem to provide confirmations, the community has learned to remain cautious. FNaF has built a reputation for misdirection, for details that seem to answer one question while opening 5 more. The books exist in their own continuities, sometimes paralleling the games, sometimes contradicting them, always leaving us to wonder which details transfer between universes and which remain isolated to their own stories. This is what we're exploring tonight. Not definitive answers, because those rarely exist in FNaF, but rather the most compelling theories the community has developed over the years. We'll examine the evidence supporting each one, acknowledge the counter-arguments, and explore why these mysteries continue to captivate us even after all this time. Whether you're a longtime theorist who's been following these debates since the beginning, a newer fan trying to understand what all the fuss is about, or simply someone who enjoys mysteries that don't resolve neatly, this journey through FNaF's most persistent questions offers something for everyone. So settle in, get comfortable, let the questions wash over you like a gentle fog as we explore Golden Freddy's true identity, debate which bite really matters, question whether Gregory is truly human, unravel the connection between the Mimic and Glitchtrap, count and recount the missing children, follow Michael Afton's twisted path through the timeline, understand Charlotte Emily's eternal purpose, place Sister Location in its proper chronological home, decode the supernatural forces of remnant and agony, and investigate the mysteries surrounding Vanessa and Vanny. These are the theories that have defined Five Nights at Freddy's. These are the questions that keep the community engaged, even in the quiet spaces between releases. These are the mysteries that remind us why we fell in love with this franchise in the first place. That sense of slowly uncovering something vast and intricate, of discovering that what seems simple on the surface contains depths we're still exploring years later. And if along the way you find yourself drifting off, letting the discussion become background noise as sleep takes hold, that's perfectly fine. These theories aren't going anywhere. They'll still be here tomorrow, still waiting to be examined from new angles, still offering their peculiar comfort in an ever-expanding universe of animatronic horror and family tragedy. Let's begin our exploration of FNAF's greatest mysteries, the Golden Freddy Enigma. One soul or two? Perhaps no character in Five Nights at Freddy's has generated more debate, more theories, more passionate arguments than Golden Freddy. This mysterious yellow bear, slumped in corners and appearing without warning, has been at the center of speculation since the very first game. The question seems simple enough on the surface. Who possesses Golden Freddy? But as with everything in FNAF, the answer refuses to stay simple. The most widely accepted theory for years has been what the community calls Golden Cassidy. This is the idea that Golden Freddy is possessed by a girl named Cassidy, one of the 5 children murdered by William Afton in the Missing Children incident of 1985. The evidence for this theory comes from multiple sources, carefully pieced together by dedicated theorists who refuse to accept coincidence as an explanation. In Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, commonly known as FNAF 6, the completion ending shows us 6 gravestones on a hill. 4 of them have clearly visible names: Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, and Fritz. These correspond to the 4 main animatronics from the original game: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. 1 gravestone sits blurred in the background, later confirmed to belong to Charlotte Emily, whose spirit possesses the puppet. But the 6th gravestone, positioned prominently in the foreground, has its name obscured by grass. This is where the survival logbook enters the picture. This supplementary book, presented as a security guard's logbook from Fazbear Entertainment, contains a word search puzzle. Hidden within this puzzle, spelled out using specific coordinates, is a name: Cassidy. The community quickly connected this to the obscured gravestone, theorizing that Cassidy was the 5th missing child, the one whose name we'd been seeking since FNAF 2, introduced us to 5 dead children in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame. But the survival logbook offers more than just a name. Throughout its pages, there are questions and responses that seem to come from 2 different entities communicating through the book. One writes in faded text, asking questions. Another responds through altered text and word searches. The faded text, many theorists believe, comes from Cassidy. And if Cassidy is communicating through this book that appears connected to FNAF 1's security office, the connection to Golden Freddy becomes even stronger. The phrase, "It's me," appears repeatedly in the first game, primarily associated with Golden Freddy's presence. This same phrase, when searched for in the survival logbook's word puzzle, can be found scattered throughout multiple times. The Ultimate Guide, while acknowledged as somewhat unreliable in the community, explicitly states that the name on the 5th gravestone can be found in the survival logbook, essentially confirming the Cassidy connection. The Golden Cassidy theory gained further support from character descriptions and behavioral patterns. In Ultimate Custom Night, one character is referred to as the one you should not have killed, a spirit so vengeful and determined that they trap William Afton in an endless nightmare rather than allow him to simply die and face whatever comes after. Many theorists identify this vengeful spirit with Golden Freddy based on the character's mechanics and the way Afton seems particularly tormented by this presence. And Cassidy, we learn from the books and supplementary materials, possesses an especially strong hatred for William Afton. So Golden Cassidy seems settled, right? Cassidy died in the missing children incident, possessed Golden Freddy, and became the primary antagonist of Ultimate Custom Night, ensuring Afton could never truly die. Except the community has never been entirely comfortable letting it rest there, because there's another candidate for Golden Freddy's occupant, a candidate who appears in FNaF 4 and whose death seems intimately connected to Fredbear, Golden Freddy's Springlock suit predecessor. The crying child, whose name we still don't know with complete certainty, died in 1983 when his head was crushed in Fredbear's jaws. This event, known as the Bite of 83, was a tragic accident caused by his older brother Michael and his friends shoving the terrified child into the animatronic's mouth as a cruel prank. The child flatlined in a hospital bed, his Fredbear plushie nearby, a mysterious voice promising to put you back together. FNaF 4 surrounds the crying child with imagery of Fredbear and Golden Freddy. The nightmare animatronics that torment him each night bear resemblance to the FNaF 1 cast, but Nightmare Fredbear stands as the ultimate threat, appearing on Night 5 with a design that blends Fredbear's features with Golden Freddy's coloring. The connection seems too deliberate to ignore. If any character deserved to possess the Golden Bear, wouldn't it be the child whose death was directly caused by that very animatronic? This is where the GoldenDuo theory emerges, a concept that attempts to reconcile these seemingly contradictory pieces of evidence. The theory proposes that both Cassidy and the crying child might possess Golden Freddy, suggesting this single animatronic could contain two souls, both children who died with connections to the Golden Bear. The Stitch Wraith epilogues from the Fazbear Frights books offer what some theorists interpret as a potential parallel for this scenario. The Stitch Wraith is an amalgamation possessed by two spirits, Andrew, a boy killed by William Afton, and Jake, a cancer patient who possessed a doll before ending up in the same mechanical frame. These two spirits coexist, sometimes cooperating, sometimes in conflict, but both equally real and present within the same vessel. If the books parallel the games, as Scott has suggested they do, then the Stitch Wraith's dual possession could indicate that Golden Freddy works similarly. Cassidy could be the vengeful spirit keeping Afton trapped in Ultimate Custom Night, while the crying child's presence explains the connections to FNaF 4 and the Happiest Day minigame from FNaF 3, where a child wearing a Golden Freddy mask finally receives the birthday party he never got to have. The evidence supporting two spirits includes behavioral inconsistencies in Golden Freddy across the games. In FNaF 1, Golden Freddy's laugh is distinctly feminine, potentially indicating Cassidy. But in FNaF 4, the Fredbear connections suggest masculine energy, possibly the crying child. Ultimate Custom Night refers to the one you should not have killed, using gender-neutral or masculine pronouns in some descriptions. Yet Cassidy is confirmed female in supplementary materials. If Andrew from the books parallels Cassidy in the games, that would make the vengeful spirit male. But the gravestone evidence strongly suggests Cassidy, confirmed female, is the fifth missing child. The GoldenDuo theory attempts to reconcile these contradictions by suggesting both spirits exist within Golden Freddy. One could be more active at certain times, explaining the different behaviors and presentations. The happiest day could be meant for the crying child specifically, while the ultimate custom night could be Cassidy's domain. The two spirits might not even be aware of each other, existing in the same space, but experiencing different realities within the golden vessel. However, critics of GoldenDuo point out several issues with this theory. Golden Freddy in FNaF 2 only shows one pair of glowing eyes in the darkness, not two. If two spirits inhabited the suit, shouldn't there be some indication of dual consciousness? The character never speaks in plural terms, never gives hints of internal conflict between two different souls. And philosophically, wouldn't two children trapped in one animatronic show more evidence of their dual nature? There's also the problem of how the crying child could have possessed Golden Freddy in the first place. The other children were murdered and stuffed into suits, their bodies providing a physical connection to the animatronics they would haunt. But the crying child died in a hospital, his body never placed inside an animatronic. Could a spirit possess something without that physical connection? The puppet managed it, seemingly attaching to the security puppet that found Charlotte's body in the rain. But that animatronic was specifically designed to watch over Charlie and wore her green bracelet. What would draw the crying child to Golden Freddy specifically beyond thematic connection? Some theorists suggest the crying child might possess Fredbear rather than Golden Freddy, with these being two different suits. The games and books occasionally treat them as distinct entities. Fredbear appears gold with a purple hat and bow tie, while Golden Freddy in FNaF 1 has a darker gold color with black accessories. But this distinction gets muddy across the franchise, with many sources treating the names as interchangeable. Then there's the possibility that neither Cassidy nor the crying child possess Golden Freddy, that we're all looking in the wrong direction entirely. Some theories propose that Phone Guy, the security instructor who dies in FNaF 1, somehow ended up in Golden Freddy. Others suggest Kelsey, a character from the Fazbear Fright story, The New Kid, might be Golden Freddy in the book continuity. And there are even theories that Golden Freddy isn't possessed at all in the traditional sense, that he's a hallucination or a manifestation of guilt, rather than a spirit-inhabited animatronic. The recent release of the week before, an interactive novel following Phone Guy's final week, adds new fuel to these debates. In this story, if you reach certain endings, it's heavily implied that Fredbear attacked Phone Guy, potentially because the crying child spirit haunts the suit. This would support the golden victim theory, the idea that the crying child alone possesses Golden Freddy. But as always with FNaF, the evidence remains just ambiguous enough to support multiple interpretations. What makes the Golden Freddy possession question so enduring is how it sits at the intersection of so many other mysteries. Solve who possesses Golden Freddy, and you might solve what happened to the crying child. Solve what happened to the crying child, and you might understand FNaF 4's true meaning. Understand FNaF 4, and you might finally piece together the Afton family's complete tragedy. Every thread connects to every other thread, creating a web where pulling on one strand inevitably tugs at a dozen others. As of now, the community remains divided. Golden Cassidy has strong evidence from the gravestone and the survival logbook. Golden Victim has thematic weight and connections to FNaF 4's central tragedy. GoldenDuo offers an elegant solution that accommodates both, though it requires accepting dual possession as possible within the FNaF universe. And alternative theories lurk in the wings, waiting for new evidence that might elevate them to prominence. perhaps the most honest answer is that we're meant to remain uncertain. Golden Freddy's mystery has fueled speculation since 2014. Solving it definitively might actually diminish the character's impact, removing that delicious uncertainty that keeps us coming back to re-examine the evidence. Sometimes the question matters more than the answer. Sometimes the journey of theorizing, debating, and discovering new connections brings more satisfaction than any confirmation ever could. So who possesses Golden Freddy? Cassidy, mourning her stolen life and seeking revenge. The crying child, piecing himself back together across the timeline. Both of them trapped together in Golden Prison, or someone else entirely, laughing at our misdirection as we search in all the wrong places. The slumped yellow bear isn't telling, and maybe that's exactly how it should be. The bite mystery, 83 or 87. If Golden Freddy's identity has sparked the most debate, the bite confusion might hold the record for causing the most genuine frustration. On the surface, it seems straightforward enough. An animatronic bit someone. It was tragic, but FNaF manages to complicate even this simple premise into a timeline puzzle that has theorists pulling their hair out trying to reconcile contradictory evidence. The bite of 87 is mentioned in Phone Guy's very first call in the original Five Nights at Freddy's. He explains that the animatronics used to be allowed to walk around during the day until the bite of 87 occurred. Someone lost their frontal lobe, he tells us, though it's amazing that the human body can live without it. This single mention created one of FNaF's earliest mysteries. Which animatronic was responsible? Who was the victim? What exactly happened? The community initially had limited options. FNaF 1 featured only 4 main animatronics: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, plus the mysterious Golden Freddy, who seemed more supernatural than physical. Early theories focused primarily on Foxy, given his out-of-order status and aggressive behavior. The Foxy did the bite of 87 theory became almost universally accepted for a time, with players pointing to his damaged state and isolated location as evidence that he'd been decommissioned after the incident. Then FNaF 2 arrived, set in 1987, according to the paychecks Mike receives, and everything became more complicated. This prequel introduced the toy animatronics, newer models with facial recognition systems supposedly linked to criminal databases to prevent predators from accessing the establishment. Phone Guy's calls in FNaF 2 mention an incident that forced the location to close, that the toy animatronics acted inappropriately toward adults and would be scrapped, that someone was injured during a birthday party. The final night features a day shift, where Jeremy Fitzgerald works during an actual party rather than the usual overnight security role. Something goes wrong during this shift. The restaurant closes, and the community connected these dots to conclude that the bite of 87 must have occurred during Jeremy's day shift, with one of the toy animatronics being responsible. But which toy? Mangle became the prime suspect. A fox animatronic that hangs from the ceiling and whose jump scare involves lunging at the player's head. The positioning seemed perfect. Mangle could have been performing for children, gotten too close to an adult, and the facial recognition system malfunctioned, causing the animatronic to bite down. The second head that Mangle drags around made the theory even more compelling. What if that extra head was originally part of a child or employee that Mangle had bitten, now permanently attached to the animatronic? Toy Chica also received nomination as the bite of 87 culprit. In Ultimate Custom Night, one of Toy Chica's voice lines mentions, "Where's my beak?" lodged in your forehead, of course. The community took this as a hint that Toy Chica might have been responsible, her beak coming loose during the bite and embedding in the victim's skull. It's gruesome, darkly funny in that very FNaF way, and potentially canon. The bite of 87 theories seemed solid, until FNaF 4 arrived and completely upended our understanding. FNaF 4 shows us, in unavoidable detail, a child having his head crushed in Fredbear's jaws. The year, confirmed through various sources, including the copyright date on the Fredbear and Friends television show playing in the background, is 1983, not 87, 83. This event, immediately labelled the Bite of 83 by the community, shows the crying child being lifted toward Fredbear's stage by his brother and 3 friends, all wearing masks of the classic animatronics. They're teasing him, chanting for Fredbear to give him a big kiss. The child is crying, terrified, pleading for them to stop. His head enters Fredbear's mouth. The springlock animatronic's jaw clamps down. Blood, darkness, a flat line in a hospital room. Now we have 2 bites. The bite of 83 that we witness in FNaF 4, and the bite of 87 that Phone Guy mentions in FNaF 1. This shouldn't be that complicated. 2 separate incidents, 4 years apart, both involving animatronics biting someone. Except the community immediately began questioning whether we actually needed both events, whether Scott had retconned the bite of 87, whether the whole thing was a massive misdirection. The arguments for the bite of 87 being retconned into the bite of 83 point to how FNaF 4 frames its tragedy. We're shown this horrific incident in graphic detail, with multiple minigames building toward the inevitable moment. If this is just one bite and there's another, arguably more important bite 4 years later, why spend so much time on the first one? Wouldn't the bite of 87, the one that changed Fazbear Entertainment's policies and restricted animatronic movement, deserve the dramatic presentation? Some theorists argued that Phone Guy in FNaF 1 simply got the year wrong. Memory is fallible, especially for someone like Phone Guy who works the overnight shift and clearly doesn't have all the information. Maybe he misremembered 83 as 87. Maybe Fazbear Entertainment deliberately obscured the date to distance themselves from the tragedy. The corporate cover-up angle has precedent in FNaF lore, with the company regularly hiding incidents and manipulating information. But this argument weakens under scrutiny. Phone Guy's calls were pre-recorded, presumably by corporate, to provide consistent information to night guards. Would a company really get the date wrong on such a significant incident? And if they were deliberately changing the date, why? What benefit comes from moving the bite 4 years forward in the timeline? Then there's the victim survival factor. Phone Guy specifically states in his FNaF 1 calls that it's amazing the victim of the bite of 87 survived without their frontal lobe, suggesting they lived through the incident. The crying child in FNaF 4 does not survive. He flatlines in the hospital. His death is the tragedy that haunts his brother and potentially sets multiple storylines in motion. If the crying child died, he can't be the victim Phone Guy references as surviving. Unless, of course, the "I will put you back together" promise means something literal. Could the crying child have been reconstructed somehow? His consciousness preserved in an animatronic body? This edges into the Gregbot theories we'll explore later, suggesting Gregory might be a robotic recreation of the crying child. If that's true, then in a twisted sense, the crying child survived the bite of 83, just not in his original body. The community consensus has settled into accepting both bites as separate events, though significant minorities still argue for various alternatives. The bite of 83 killed the crying child and occurred at Fredbear's family diner. The bite of 87 injured an adult, probably an employee or Jeremy Fitzgerald himself, during a birthday party at the FNaF 2 location, and the victims survived but lost their frontal lobe. This interpretation requires accepting that Fazbear Entertainment had an almost comically bad safety record, with animatronics biting people on at least 2 separate occasions. But given everything else we know about the company, the murders, the cover-ups, the use of remnant and dangerous spring-lock suits, 2 bites seems almost conservative. If anything, we should probably assume there were more incidents that we simply never heard about. The identity of the bite of 87 culprit remains technically unsolved. Mangle has the most evidence between the positioning of the jump scare, the timing in FNaF 2, and various hints dropped in later games. Toy Chica has that suspicious line about her beak. Even Fredbear gets nominated by some theorists who believe both bites involve the same animatronic, just at different locations and times. What's particularly interesting is how the bite mystery reflects FNaF's approach to horror. The jump scares frighten you in the moment. The atmosphere creates dread, but the true horror emerges from piecing together what happened to these children, these employees, these families caught in Fazbear Entertainment's machinery of tragedy. The bite of 83 isn't scary because we see it happen. It's scary because we understand it's an accident, that Michael didn't mean to kill his brother, that this moment of cruelty snowballed into decades of haunting and horror. The bite of 87 works differently. We never see it. We only hear about it secondhand, through Phone Guy's matter-of-fact recitation. But knowing it happened, knowing someone survived with brain damage, knowing Fazbear Entertainment's response was to simply restrict animatronic movement during the day, rather than address fundamental safety issues, that paints a picture of institutional negligence more chilling than any jump scare. Some theorists have even proposed that the whole bite confusion is intentional, that Scott designed FNaF 4 to make us question whether the bite of 87 existed at all. Maybe the uncertainty itself is the point, forcing us to confront how unreliable our sources are, how much we assume based on limited information, how easily corporate messaging can obscure truth. There's also a metatextual element to consider. The community latched onto the bite of 87 immediately after FNaF 1, making it one of the earliest mysteries people tried to solve. By introducing the bite of 83 in FNaF 4, Scott took our certainty and shattered it. He reminded us that in this franchise, you never truly know anything. Just when you think you've figured something out, new information arrives that forces you to reconsider everything. As of early 2026, most theorists work under the assumption that both bites occurred. The bite of 83 killed the crying child and traumatized the Afton family. The bite of 87 injured an employee, or Jeremy, at the FNaF 2 location and changed company policy. The exact details remain fuzzy, the specific culprits uncertain, but the general framework seems solid enough to build other theories upon. Whether this framework will survive the next game, the next book, the next teaser image, remains to be seen. In FNaF, nothing stays settled for long. Today's confirmed fact becomes tomorrow's debated theory, becomes next week's retconned backstory. The bites exemplify this perfectly. Two separate incidents that blur together in fan discussion, creating confusion that might be accidental, or might be exactly what Scott intended all along. So did the bite of 87 happen? Yes, probably. Did it matter as much as we initially thought? Maybe not. Does the bite of 83 replace it or complement it? Complement, most likely. Will we ever know for certain? In FNaF, certainty is always temporary. And perhaps that's the most horrifying bite of all. The one that sinks into our need for concrete answers and refuses to let go. Gregory's true nature, human, robot, or something else. When Security Breach introduced Gregory as its protagonist, the community immediately began asking questions. Who is this child? Where did he come from? Why is he in the Pizzaplex after hours? But as theorists dug deeper into the game's evidence, those questions evolved into something more fundamental and unsettling. Is Gregory even human? The Gregbot theory proposes that Gregory is not a flesh and blood child, but rather an animatronic recreation, specifically a robotic copy of the crying child, designed by someone seeking to fulfill the promise, "I will put you back together." On its surface, this sounds absurd. Gregory clearly acts human throughout Security Breach. He feels fear when Vanny chases him, shows concern for Glamrock Freddy's well-being, displays very childlike reactions to stress and danger. Surely he can't be a robot. But FNaF has established that realistic human robots exist in this universe. The novel trilogy introduces Charlie, Henry Emily's daughter, who we learn was recreated as a series of increasingly sophisticated android bodies after her death. These androids didn't just look human. They believed themselves to be human, possessing memories and emotions that felt entirely genuine. If Henry could create such realistic copies of his daughter, what's to stop someone else from attempting the same with another lost child? The evidence for Gregbot starts with Gregory's appearance. Multiple theorists have noted the striking similarities between Gregory's design and the crying child from FNaF 4. Both have brown hair, similar face shapes, striped shirts, shorts. The specifics differ. Gregory's stripes are horizontal while the crying child's are more varied, but the overall aesthetic parallels are undeniable. In a franchise where character designs are carefully considered, these similarities feel deliberate. During the game, when Gregory gets close to Vanny, his vision glitches. The screen distorts in ways that suggest digital interference rather than simple fear or psychological stress. The community noted that this glitch effect resembles how the Glamrock animatronics experience visual distortions when their systems are hacked or damaged. If Gregory's vision glitches like an animatronic's sensors, might he share more with the machines than we realize? There's also Gregory's complete lack of background. According to Vanessa, there are no records of Gregory's past. No missing child reports match his description. No one seems to be looking for him. When we see him in the alley ending of Security Breach, he appears to be homeless, living rough without family or support system. For a human child, this raises uncomfortable questions about neglect and abandonment. But for a robot who only recently gained consciousness or was recently activated, the absence of documentation makes perfect sense. Gregory's technical abilities throughout Security Breach far exceed what we'd expect from a normal child. He repairs and upgrades Glamrock Freddy using complex animatronic components, understanding the mechanical systems well enough to transplant parts from other robots and integrate them successfully. In some endings, he drives a van out of the Pizzaplex and manages to recharge Freddy using a car battery, showing knowledge of both vehicles and animatronic power systems. These skills suggest someone with engineering knowledge or programming, not a homeless child who presumably lacks formal education. The redemption ending provides one of the most intriguing pieces of evidence. In the final scene, Gregory, Vanessa, and Glamrock Freddy's severed head enjoy ice cream together. Gregory's ice cream is shaped like Fredbear's head. This could be simple flavor choice or pizzaplex theming, but many theorists see it as a deliberate reference to the Bite of 83, a visual callback connecting Gregory to the crying child's death. If Gregory is a robot built to resurrect the crying child, this Fredbear ice cream becomes a darkly ironic symbol. The animatronic that killed him now rendered harmless and consumable. The tales from the Pizzaplex books, particularly the story GGY, provide additional context. This story follows a boy named Gregory, who attends school, has friends, and leads a seemingly normal life. But we learn he's patient 46, the mysterious therapy patient from the security breach CDs, who killed multiple therapists and helped hack the Pizzaplex's systems. The therapist's notes mention Gregory having great parents and a great childhood before everything changed. This creates an interesting contradiction. If Gregory had great parents and a wonderful childhood, why is he homeless in security breach? What happened to transform him from a normal child into someone connected to murder and hacking? The Gregbot theory offers a potential answer. Perhaps the original Gregory, a real human child, died or was killed. Someone then created a robotic Gregory to replace him, programming this new version with the original child's memories. The robot believes he had great parents because those are the implanted memories from the real Gregory's life. But the current Gregory's homelessness reflects his actual status as a recently created machine without true family. However, several pieces of evidence contradict Gregbot. The Five Nights at Freddy's character encyclopedia explicitly lists Gregory as human. While the encyclopedia has proven unreliable on some details, this seems like a straightforward enough claim to trust. When Gregory describes potential injuries, he uses phrases like crushed and twisted into a meat pretzel, suggesting an awareness that his body is made of flesh and blood. A robot wouldn't naturally use meat to describe himself unless he was genuinely unaware of his artificial nature. Glamrock Freddy's reaction to Gregory also suggests human biology. When Gregory hides in Freddy's chest cavity, the animatronic notes that Gregory is broken and suggests taking him to a first aid station. If Freddy's sensors detected a robot rather than an injured child, wouldn't he recommend parts and service instead? Unless Freddy is also deceived by how realistic Gregory's construction is, this interaction implies Gregory reads as biologically human to animatronic scanners. The therapy CDs from Security Breach create timeline complications for Gregbot as well. If we accept that Gregory is patient 46, then he's been seeing therapists at the Pizzaplex for an extended period, showing up for sessions, communicating through drawings and limited words. This extended contact with adults who work at the facility seems difficult to reconcile with the idea that Gregory is a robot. Wouldn't someone notice? Wouldn't a therapist realize they're treating an animatronic rather than a child? Some theorists have proposed a middle ground. Perhaps Gregory is human but was modified with animatronic components, becoming a cyborg rather than a pure robot. This could explain the glitching near Vanny, as technological parts interfacing with organic tissue. It would account for his advanced skills while maintaining his essential humanity. And it would let both the Gregory is human and Gregory has robot characteristics evidence coexist without contradiction. Others suggest that Gregory might be a clone rather than a robot, a biological recreation of the crying child, using remnant or some other supernatural means. Remnant, the molten metal infused with human memories and emotions, has shown the ability to preserve consciousness and even sustain dead bodies, as we see with Michael Afton. Could remnant technology advance to the point where someone could grow a new body and implant another person's consciousness? It sounds extreme, but in a franchise featuring murderous rabbit suits and reality-bending ball pits, too extreme becomes relative. The connection to the crying child remains the strongest thread running through all Gregory theories, regardless of whether he's human, robot, or something in between. Gregory resembles the crying child. Gregory's story involves themes of being broken and needing to be fixed or put back together. Gregory's association with glam rock Freddy, a bear animatronic, echoes the crying child's attachment to his Fredbear plush. Gregory's fear of Vanny parallels the crying child's fear of the animatronic performers. These connections persist across multiple theories, suggesting that even if we're wrong about the specifics of Gregory's nature, we're right about his thematic link to FNaF 4's tragedy. It's worth noting that the question, is Gregory a robot, might be less important than understanding what Gregory represents, whether he's literally the crying child resurrected or simply a parallel to that character. Gregory's journey through Security Breach explores similar themes: a child trapped in a dangerous place, a child trying to survive against impossible odds, a child seeking help from an unlikely protector, a child who, at the end, finds some measure of peace and safety. The Gregbot theory taps into our fears about identity and consciousness. If Gregory is a robot who believes himself human, what does that say about the nature of personhood? If someone creates a perfect copy of a dead child, implants it with that child's memories, and sets it loose in the world, is the copy real? Does it have rights? Does it deserve protection even though it's artificial? These philosophical questions give Gregory's story weight beyond simple horror game narrative. As of the most recent releases, the evidence leans toward Gregory being human. But a human with unusual abilities, mysterious origins, and possible connection to Glitchtrap's influence through his time as Patient 46. The robotic elements that theorists noticed, the glitching, the technical skills, the lack of records, these might be explained by hacking and digital interference rather than Gregory himself being artificial. But FNaF has a history of revealing that the obvious answer was misdirection all along. Just when we feel confident about something, new information surfaces that forces us to reconsider. Gregory might be human now, but one more game, one more book, one more teaser could change everything. Until Scott or Steel Wool explicitly confirms Gregory's nature beyond doubt, Gregbot will remain a possibility, lurking in the theory community like Vanny in the Pizzaplex vents. So is Gregory human? Probably. Is he definitely human? In FNaF, definitely is a word we learn to use sparingly, and whether Gregory is boy, robot, clone, cyborg, or something we haven't even considered yet, his role in Security Breach's story remains compelling. A child trying to survive in a world where the lines between human and machine have been blurred beyond recognition. The Mimic and Glitchtrap, one entity or separate forces. Few theoretical debates in recent FNaF history have generated as much passionate argument as the relationship between the Mimic and Glitchtrap. These two entities, one a physical endoskeleton and the other a digital virus, seem intimately connected, yet the exact nature of their relationship remains frustratingly ambiguous. Are they the same being? Different aspects of the same consciousness? Completely separate entities who happen to operate similarly? The community remains divided. To understand this debate, we need to examine each entity individually before exploring how they might connect. The Mimic, introduced through the Tales from the Pizzaplex books and confirmed in the Security Breach Ruin DLC, is an animatronic endoskeleton created by Edwin Murray. This wasn't originally a weapon or monster, but rather a learning machine designed to help with various tasks through behavioral mimicry. Edwin programmed it with advanced adaptive software, allowing it to observe actions and replicate them with increasing sophistication. The tragedy began when Edwin's young son David died. The exact circumstances vary between sources. Some suggest a vehicle accident, others point to different causes, but the result was the same. Grief-stricken and increasingly erratic, Edwin began taking his rage out on the Mimic, beating it, verbally abusing it, treating it as a target for his anguish. The Mimic, designed to learn through observation, learned violence. It learned cruelty. And when Edwin eventually perished, possibly killed by his own creation, the Mimic continued its education by murdering anyone who entered its domain. Fazbear Entertainment eventually acquired the Mimic, along with other assets from Murray's costume manor. At some point, the endoskeleton ended up trapped beneath what would become Freddy Fazbear's mega pizzaplex, locked behind security protocols and sealed in concrete. The MXEES program, a digital rabbit that appears glitchy and blue, was created specifically to keep the Mimic contained. Anyone who encountered the Mimic faced death, usually through strangulation or brutal physical violence, often while the Mimic wore costumes to disguise its endoskeleton frame. Glitchtrap's origin comes from a different direction. When Fazbear Entertainment commissioned an in-universe VR game to trivialize and discredit their own sordid history, the development team needed authentic materials to scan into the virtual environment. They received old circuit boards, vintage hardware from decommissioned animatronics. Among these pieces of technology was something corrupted, something malicious that manifested in the game as a yellow rabbit entity the developers dubbed Glitchtrap. This digital entity possessed awareness, intelligence, and apparent goals. It could manipulate the virtual environment, create minigames, and most disturbingly, interact with human players in ways that affected their minds. Beta tester Jeremy experienced nightmares and distress after encountering Glitchtrap, ultimately harming himself with a paper slicer. Tape Girl tried to quarantine the entity by fragmenting its code, but Glitchtrap persisted. Eventually, it merged with Vanessa, another beta tester, transforming her into Vanny, a killer in a homemade rabbit suit who serves Glitchtrap's purposes. The community initially believed Glitchtrap was William Afton, or at least Afton's consciousness preserved in circuit boards. The rabbit suit design parallels Spring Bonnie, Afton's murder suit. Glitchtrap's behavior, luring and manipulating, mirrors Afton's methods. The entity's purple coloring and connection to the Fazbear murders all pointed toward Afton's digital resurrection. Then the Tales books introduced the Mimic, and suddenly another interpretation became possible. What if the corrupted circuit boards didn't contain Afton's consciousness at all? What if they came from the Mimic, and Glitchtrap could be the Mimic's software, the M1 program that taught it to learn and replicate, manifesting in digital space? In this interpretation, Glitchtrap would be mimicking William Afton, because it observed his crimes, learned his patterns, and now replicates them in virtual and physical space. The glitch mimic theory, which proposes this connection, has accumulated substantial supporting evidence. An update to Help Wanted 2 revealed that entering the code 1979 in a specific location causes Glitchtrap to hand the player a white tiger plushie. This plushie is identical to the one David Murray received for his birthday. The same David whose death set the mimic on its dark path. Why would Glitchtrap reference this specific detail unless it has direct connection to the mimic's origin story? In the pizza party ending of Help Wanted, Glitchtrap performs the exact same action that the mimic does in secret of the mimic's bad ending. Both stuff a victim into a Freddy Fazbear suit. Both celebrate this murder with similar gestures. The parallel feels too specific to be coincidence. If Glitchtrap and the mimic are different entities with no connection, why would they share such distinctive behavior? Burntrap, the decayed rabbit animatronic, encountered in Security Breach's original ending, has design elements that match both Afton's Springtrap appearance and the mimic's physical form. The arm positioning, the mixture of costume and endoskeleton, even the way it moves all show characteristics of both entities. Some theorists believe Burntrap is the mimic wearing what's left of Afton's Spring Bonnie suit, explaining why it looks like Springtrap, but acts according to the mimic's patterns. Glitchtrap's model includes wet texture around the eyes and mouth, resembling tears and drool. In Tales, when Edwin beat the mimic, it cried and drooled, showing moisture that seemed almost organic despite its mechanical nature. This detail, easy to overlook, connects the digital Glitchtrap to the physical mimic through shared visual characteristics that most entities wouldn't possess. The Help Wanted 2 update further complicates things by having Glitchtrap hand out items connected to the mimic's backstory, suggesting the digital entity has access to memories and information from Edwin Murray's time. Unless Afton somehow witnessed the mimic's creation and torture, he wouldn't know about the white tiger plush or other specific details from David's short life. But the mimic would. The mimic lived through those events. However, glitch mimic theory faces significant challenges. In Princess Quest 4, the ending that supposedly destroys Glitchtrap permanently, the player must collect 6 memories from Afton's victims. Not the mimic's victims, Afton's. Why would defeating Glitchtrap require gathering memories from children Afton killed if Glitchtrap is actually the mimic? The mimic has its own victims, its own history. The insistence on Afton connections even in content released after the mimic's introduction suggests deliberate linking to William rather than substitution of the mimic for William. Glitchtrap uses the phrase, "I always come back," in Princess Quest. This line has become synonymous with William Afton, his catchphrase that defines his refusal to stay dead. The mimic would have no reason to use this specific phrase unless it was directly mimicking Afton. But if Glitchtrap is simply the mimic's program, why would it choose to mimic Afton specifically? Why not Edwin Murray, who it knew far more intimately? Why not one of its other victims? The theatrical, almost performative nature of Glitchtrap's actions seems distinctly Afton-like rather than mimic-like. The mimic kills brutally and efficiently, strangling and crushing without ceremony. Glitchtrap plays games, creates puzzles, toys with victims in ways that suggest intelligence and personality, rather than mere programming mimicking observed behavior. The digital rabbit shows creativity that the mimic's established pattern learning doesn't quite explain. Some theorists propose a middle ground solution. Perhaps Glitchtrap started as the mimic's program, but during its time in the digital space, it absorbed Afton's consciousness from the circuit boards that were also scanned. Now Glitchtrap is a fusion entity, part mimic software, part Afton's remnant preserved awareness, creating something new that contains elements of both, but is neither one individually. This fusion theory would explain why Glitchtrap shows mimic-specific knowledge while also demonstrating Afton-specific behavior. It accounts for the deliberate Afton connections while incorporating the mimic's established backstory, and it provides narrative weight to the Princess Quest ending, where freeing the victim's memories might actually separate the corrupted fusion back into its component parts, neutralizing the threat. Another possibility is that Glitchtrap and the Mimic are parallel entities, two separate beings that both learned to mimic William Afton for different reasons. The Mimic might have witnessed the missing children incident in 1985, as some book evidence suggests, learning murder from observation of Afton's crimes. Glitchtrap could be a fragment of Afton preserved in burned circuit boards, continuing his work from digital space. Both entities mimic Afton because both have direct connection to his methods, but they remain distinct beings with separate origins and goals. The recent release of Secret of the Mimic adds new dimensions to this debate without quite settling it. The game shows the Mimic's origin story in detail, confirming Edwin's tragedy and the endoskeleton's descent into violence, but it also includes Easter eggs and connections that link back to Help Wanted and Glitchtrap's emergence. The bad ending's mirror of Help Wanted's pizza party suggests intent to connect these entities, yet the game never explicitly states Glitchtrap is the Mimic or Glitchtrap is separate from the Mimic. This ambiguity might be the point. FNaF has always thrived on letting the community debate and theorize. By leaving the Glitchtrap Mimic connection vague, the developers ensure that theorists will continue analyzing every detail, searching for definitive proof that might never arrive. The mystery becomes self-sustaining, fueling discussion that keeps the community engaged between releases. From a narrative perspective, whether Glitchtrap and the Mimic are one, two, or something in between, affects how we understand Security Breach, Ruin, and Help Wanted's events. If they're the same, then William Afton truly is dead. His digital echo finally deleted in Princess Quest IV, leaving only the Mimic to carry forward as the franchise's new antagonist. If they're separate, then Afton might still lurk somewhere in the code, waiting to return despite the "I always come back" line becoming increasingly ironic. The thematic implications differ as well. Glitchtrap as Afton explores legacy, how evil perpetuates beyond death, how one man's crimes echo through generations. Glitchtrap as the Mimic examines trauma, how violence teaches violence, how something designed for good can be corrupted into monstrous behavior. Both themes resonate with FNaF's core narrative, the cycle of tragedy feeding upon itself, creating new horrors from old. Currently, the community leans toward Glitch Mimic being true, though significant populations still argue for Glitchtrap as Afton, or for the two entities being related but distinct. The evidence supporting a Mimic connection keeps accumulating with each new release, from the White Tiger plush to the behavioral parallels, to the emphasis on mimicry as a core concept in the current era of FNaF storytelling. But until we receive explicit, unambiguous confirmation from Scott, Steel Wool, or another authoritative source, the debate will continue. Theorists will analyze every frame of every game, every sentence of every book, searching for the detail that finally proves their interpretation correct. And in true FNaF fashion, that detail will probably arrive alongside 3 new mysteries that spawn 5 additional theories. So are Glitchtrap and the Mimic the same entity? The evidence suggests yes. Does the evidence prove it beyond doubt? In FNaF, evidence proves nothing beyond doubt. Will future releases clarify their relationship? Possibly. Will those clarifications spawn entirely new questions and debates? Absolutely. The rabbit suit and the endoskeleton, digital ghost and physical threat, might be one, might be two, might be three if we count Aftons separately, or might be something we haven't even considered yet, laughing at our attempts to categorize and separate what was always meant to remain beautifully, frustratingly ambiguous. The missing children, 5, 6, or more. The missing children incident stands as one of FNaF's foundational tragedies. In 1985, William Afton lured children to the back room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, murdered them, and stuffed their bodies into animatronic suits. Their spirits possessed these machines, transforming Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy from entertainment into instruments of revenge. This much we know with relative certainty. But how many children died that day? The answer should be simple. Count the graves, count the animatronics, count the victims. Except in FNaF, counting becomes complicated. FNaF 2's Give Gifts. Give Life minigame shows the puppet placing masks on 4 slumped figures. Then a 5th appears before Golden Freddy jump scares the player. 4 + 1 = 5. 5 children, 5 victims, 5 missing kids whose disappearance sparked investigations that Fazbear Entertainment somehow survived despite obvious culpability. The FNaF 3 newspapers confirmed that 5 children went missing. Police suspected an employee. The bodies were never found. The animatronics started smelling bad and leaking blood. The restaurant closed. All of this aligns with 5 children being murdered and hidden in the suits. Gabriel in Freddy, Jeremy in Bonnie, Susie in Chica, Fritz in Foxy, and Cassidy in Golden Freddy. FNaF 6's gravestone ending seems to confirm this. 6 graves total, 5 for the children and 1 for Charlotte Emily, who possessed the puppet. The names on 4 graves, Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, correspond to the 4 main animatronics. The 5th obscured name, revealed through the survival logbook as Cassidy, belongs to Golden Freddy's occupant. Everything adds up to 5 missing children, but small details keep suggesting that the count might be wrong. In Ultimate Custom Night, where animatronics and entities from across the series torment what's presumably William Afton, there's a character called the One You Should Not Have Killed. Singular. Not the 5 you should not have killed. This character, heavily implied to be Golden Freddy, or at least associated with Golden Freddy, seems to hold special significance beyond the other victims. Into the Pit, both the book and the recent game, shows 6 bodies in the back room. 6, not 5. The yellow rabbit, representing Afton, stands with 6 slumped children rather than 5. This could be artistic license or book continuity differing from game continuity, but FNaF rarely includes details like body count without reason. If Into the Pit shows 6 victims, might there be a 6th child we've overlooked? Throughout various minigames and Easter eggs, players have noted instances where 6 children appear rather than 5. Balloon Boy's collection in certain games shows 6 hats. Some hidden rooms display 6 sets of footprints or 6 child silhouettes. These could be errors, repeated assets that accidentally got counted twice, or they could be hints toward a missing piece of the puzzle. The crying child complicates the count further. He died in 1983, 2 years before the missing children incident. His death was public, witnessed by party attendees, investigated by authorities. He's not one of the missing children, but he is a dead child whose spirit seems to persist in some form. Does he count toward the total child victims? Does he factor into the possession equations? even though his death was separate from Afton's deliberate murders. Some theories propose that the crying child is the fifth missing child, that the missing children incident actually occurred in 83 rather than 85, and that the newspapers got the date wrong, or Fazbear Entertainment deliberately changed it for liability reasons. This would make the crying child's death part of Afton's murder spree rather than a separate accident. But this theory requires ignoring or reinterpreting substantial evidence about when the missing children incident occurred. Charlotte Emily further muddies the count. She died before the missing children incident, murdered by William Afton outside of Freddy Fazbear's location during the rain, while the security puppet struggled to reach her. Charlie's death was the catalyst, the first murder that taught Afton his methods and planted the seeds for his subsequent crimes. She's not counted among the missing children because her death was separate, earlier, different circumstances. Yet she's still a child, murdered by William, still possesses an animatronic, still seeks some form of justice or closure. If we count every child whose death connects to Afton's crimes, and who possesses some form of animatronic, or remains as a spirit, the number climbs higher than 5. Charlotte makes 6. The crying child, if he possesses Golden Freddy or any other animatronic, makes 7. Elizabeth Afton, killed by Circus Baby in a separate incident, makes 8. And these are just the named confirmed child deaths. Fazbear Entertainment operated multiple locations over decades. How many other children might have died in incidents we never heard about? The DCI, or Dead Child Incident, referenced in FNaF 2's newspapers, mentions additional children's bodies being connected to the investigation. These might be the same 5 missing children, or they could represent additional victims at the 1987 location. If Afton killed more children during the FNaF 2 timeline, possessing the toy animatronics before they were scrapped, that adds another 5 or 6 victims to his count. Then there's the question of whether possession requires a body in the suit. The established pattern shows murdered children being stuffed into animatronics, their physical remains providing an anchor for their spirits. But Charlotte possessed the puppet without being placed inside it. Her body remained outside, where she died. Yet her spirit merged with the security puppet that discovered her. If possession can occur without direct physical contact, might there be more spirits attached to animatronics than we realize? Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie present another counting complication. These dark entities appear throughout the series, often helping or hindering the player, but their origins remain uncertain. Some theories identify them as manifestations of agony, emotional energy given form. Others suggest they're spirits of employees who died in Springlock failures. If Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie represent additional deaths connected to Fazbear Entertainment, the victim count continues climbing. The book continuities introduce even more children. Michael Brooks in the novel trilogy, Andrew in Fazbear Frights, Kelsey from The New Kid, and numerous other child characters who die and possess things. Some of these parallel game characters, offering different interpretations of the same role. Others seem entirely separate, victims existing only in their respective book continuities. Do any of these book children count toward the game total? The lines blur when evidence from books is used to solve game mysteries. Part of the counting confusion stems from how FNaF presents information. The series rarely gives complete lists or explicit numbers. We piece together victim counts from newspaper clippings, minigames, environmental details, implied rather than stated. This creates room for interpretation, for disagreement about whether certain deaths count toward specific totals or represent separate categories. The community generally accepts 5 as the canonical number of missing children in the main incident. Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy were murdered together, or in close succession, stuffed into the classic animatronics, and their disappearance sparked the investigation that briefly closed the restaurant. This fits the available evidence and provides a clean, understandable framework. But 5 missing children doesn't mean 5 total child victims in a FNaF. Charlotte died before them. The crying child died before them. Elizabeth died separately. The DCI might represent additional deaths. Shadow entities might represent more deaths. The actual total of children who died as a result of Fazbear Entertainment's negligence and William Afton's crimes almost certainly exceeds 5, possibly by a significant margin. Some theorists argue for 6 missing children specifically, pointing to all the 6s that appear in the games. 6 graves in FNaF 6, 6 bodies in Into the Pit, 6 this and 6 that scattered throughout the series. If there is a 6th missing child, where are they? Which animatronic do they possess? Why would Fazbear Entertainment and the newspapers report 5 if 6 actually went missing? The GoldenDuo theory offers one explanation. If 2 children possess Golden Freddy, then 6 total children might have died in the incident. 5 whose bodies went into Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and 1 of Golden Freddy's slots, plus the crying child from 83 somehow ending up in Golden Freddy's 2nd slot. This accounts for a 6th child while maintaining the established framework. Another possibility is that 1 child's death was witnessed or reported separately, reducing the missing count to 5 even though 6 died. The crying child's death was public, so he wouldn't count as missing. If another child died during the incident in a way that left evidence, they might not be included in the missing children total, despite being one of Afton's victims. The counting problem exemplifies FNaF's approach to law. Simple questions like, how many children died, become exercises in interpretation, requiring players to evaluate evidence, weigh sources, decide what counts and what doesn't. The lack of definitive answers frustrates some fans while captivating others. Those who prefer clear, unambiguous narratives find FNaF's vagueness maddening. Those who enjoy puzzles and mysteries find it endlessly engaging. As the series continues, new games and books might clarify the victim count, or they might introduce additional deaths that further complicate the tally. FNaF has shown no signs of settling into simple, easily counted categories. If anything, each new release seems to add layers rather than strip them away, creating increasingly complex webs of tragedy where one death leads to another in cascading consequences. So how many children went missing? 5, according to the newspapers and most interpretations of the evidence. How many children died connected to FNaF's overarching narrative? More than 5, certainly. 8 at minimum, probably more, potentially dozens, depending on how broadly we define connected to the narrative. How many of these deaths matter to the main plot? That's subjective, depending on which theories you accept and which storylines you emphasize. In FNaF, every death matters to someone. Every child who died became a spirit, an echo, a haunting presence affecting the living world. Whether they number 5, 6, 10, or 50, each represents a life cut short, a family destroyed, a tragedy that ripples outward through the decades. The exact count matters less than understanding that behind every animatronic, every jump scare, every horror, there are children who deserved better than to become entertainment industry statistics, Fazbear Entertainment's dirty little secrets hidden in mechanical shells and sealed rooms. We count them because they deserve to be counted. We name them because they deserve to be named. And we keep asking how many, because the answer, whatever it is, will never feel like enough acknowledgement of their suffering. Michael Afton's journey and the survival logbook. Few characters in FNaF have as complex and tragic an arc as Michael Afton, the son who killed his brother through a cruel prank, the employee who worked night shifts across multiple deadly locations, the corpse who continued walking, searching for his father to make things right. Michael's journey through the FNaF timeline connects nearly every major event, making him perhaps the most important character besides William Afton himself. We first meet Michael, or at least the evidence suggests it's Michael, in FNaF 4. He's the older brother, the teenager wearing a foxy mask, who bullies the crying child relentlessly. This Michael organizes the cruel prank on his brother's birthday, gathering his friends to lift the terrified child toward Fredbear's animatronic mouth. When Fredbear's jaws close, crushing the crying child's head, Michael's life changes forever. The immediate aftermath isn't shown explicitly, but we can infer Michael's guilt from his later actions. He watched his brother die from injuries he directly caused. Whether it was truly an accident, a prank gone horribly wrong, or something darker, Michael bears responsibility. This guilt becomes the engine driving much of his behavior throughout the series. The community widely accepts, based on substantial circumstantial evidence, that Michael grows up to become the night guard in multiple FNaF games, though he appears to use different names for each job. In FNaF 1, he goes by Mike Schmidt. In Sister Location, he uses what seems to be his real name or something closer to it. This pattern of using aliases suggests someone hiding their true identity, perhaps avoiding detection by authorities or by Fazbear Entertainment themselves. Why would Michael keep returning to Freddy Fazbear's locations despite the obvious danger? The current dominant theory proposes that William Afton, Michael's father, sends him to these locations as a form of punishment or test. In Sister Location's private room, Michael records a monologue revealing that he was supposed to find something, that he's been to a facility before, that he found it. This suggests a pattern of William directing Michael to various Fazbear-connected sites. But Michael's motivations seem to evolve beyond just following his father's orders. By the end of Sister Location, after being scooped and used as a skin suit by Ennard, Michael makes a declaration. He's going to find William. He survived his father's tests and now pursues his own goal, presumably to stop William from causing more harm. Sister Location's true ending shows Michael as a purple corpse, his body decayed and rotting yet still animated by the remnant infused into him by Ennard's brief occupation. This transformation from human to undead echoes his father's own Springlock transformation. Both Aftons become corpses walking around in mechanical shells, neither truly alive nor able to die, caught in a liminal state between human and animatronic. Michael's survival in this undead state enables him to continue working night shifts at locations that would kill normal humans. The animatronics attack with lethal intent. Guards die regularly, yet Michael persists, night after night, location after location, perhaps because he's already dead, and Remnant keeps his consciousness bound to his rotting vessel. The survival logbook provides our most direct insight into Michael's mental state. This security logbook, ostensibly from Fazbear Entertainment as a gift to employees, gets used by 2 or possibly 3 different entities to communicate. Michael apparently owned this logbook during or after his FNaF 1 employment, evidenced by references to the original game's details. Throughout the logbook, faded text asks questions. What do you see? Who was the first person you saw when you woke up? Does he still talk to you? These questions seem directed at Michael, but also at someone else. Possibly the crying child, whose spirit might linger attached to Michael through guilt or some supernatural connection. Michael doodles in the margins. Nightmare Fredbear appears in his sketches, suggesting he has personal experience with that character beyond simply knowing it exists. If the nightmare animatronics from FNaF 4 were real in some capacity, experiments conducted in William's underground facility, Michael might have been subjected to them as punishment for killing his brother, or he might have experienced nightmares about them naturally, his subconscious processing trauma through these monstrous visions. The logbook also contains puzzles that spell out Cassidy, connecting this book to Golden Freddy and the fifth missing child. Why would Michael's logbook contain hidden messages about Cassidy, unless there's a connection between Michael, the crying child, Cassidy, and Golden Freddy? The GoldenDuo theory suggests both the crying child and Cassidy possess Golden Freddy, and if Michael carries guilt or some spiritual link to his dead brother, the crying child's connection to Golden Freddy might create a transitive property where Michael becomes aware of Cassidy. Another voice appears in the logbook through altered text, possibly the crying child communicating with Michael from beyond death, or possibly Cassidy. The conversation seems to involve one entity trying to determine the other's identity, gathering information through questions and puzzles. This supernatural communication through a security logbook emphasizes how FNaF blends mundane objects with otherworldly significance. Michael's role in Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction from FNaF 3, remains somewhat ambiguous but strongly suggested. The silent protagonist who works as the night guard at this location doesn't speak or provide identifying information, but the establishment's subsequent fire, which seems deliberately set, and Michael's stated goal to find William create a compelling argument that Michael worked this job. If Michael set Fazbear's Fright ablaze, he was attempting to destroy Springtrap, his father's undead form discovered in the sealed safe room and put on display. The fire fails, of course. Springtrap escapes. But the attempt demonstrates Michael's willingness to use extreme measures to stop William's continued existence. Finally, Michael arrives at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Simulator, the location that serves as a trap designed by Henry Emily to gather all the possessed animatronics and incinerate them together. Michael takes the job as manager, salvaging the animatronics that arrive nightly in the alley behind the building. He brings in Scrap Baby, his sister Elizabeth, Molten Freddy, containing remnant from the original missing children, Lefty, designed to capture the puppet containing Charlotte, and Scraptrap, his father William, in yet another deteriorated form. Henry's recorded speech during the completion ending addresses Michael directly. Although, for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. This acknowledgement of Michael's sacrifice, his willingness to burn alongside the others to finally end the cycle of tragedy, provides Michael's arc with closure. He dies in the fire that purges the spirits, his guilt perhaps finally absolved through this ultimate act of taking responsibility. But did Michael truly die in that fire? FNaF rarely lets death be permanent. Remnant preserves consciousness. Agony can create echoes of people who should be gone. Some theorists have even proposed that Glamrock Freddy in Security Breach behaves in ways that might be influenced by Michael's presence, protecting Gregory with a paternal instinct that these theorists speculate could come from Michael's lingering consciousness. This theory, while creative, has limited concrete evidence to support it. Glamrock Freddy shows personality and awareness that could simply be advanced AI rather than human consciousness. The fact that he protects Gregory might just be his programming, especially since he reboots in safe mode early in Security Breach, potentially cutting him off from whatever corruption affects the other Glamrocks. What we know for certain is that Michael Afton lived a cursed existence, defined by a single mistake made as a teenager and the decades of attempting to atone that followed. Whether he found peace in Henry's fire, whether some fragment of him persists in Glamrock Freddy, whether he accomplished his goals or failed despite his efforts, Michael's journey represents FNaF's central theme. The past doesn't stay buried. Guilt doesn't release its grip. And sometimes, trying to fix what you've broken only leads to more breakage. Michael's story resonates because most of us understand, on some level, that feeling of having done something we can't take back. Most of us haven't accidentally killed our younger siblings, obviously, but we've all made mistakes that created consequences we couldn't control. Michael's tragedy is extreme, horror game extreme, but the emotional core remains relatable. The desire to make things right, the fear that you've damaged something beyond repair, the question of whether you can ever truly atone, the survival logbook, Michael's sketches of Nightmare Fredbear, his journey from guilty teenager to undead night guard to willing sacrifice. All of it builds a character who exists mostly in implications and clues, but feels more fully realized than many explicitly developed protagonists. We never see Michael's face in the games outside of his purple corpse form. We rarely hear him speak. Yet we understand him better than characters who talk constantly. That's the power of FNaF's storytelling. Michael Afton is barely there, yet he's everywhere. His fingerprints mark nearly every game. His guilt echoes through the decades, and whether he's truly gone or somehow persists, his impact on the narrative remains undeniable. The brother who killed his brother, the son who hunted his father, the corpse who wouldn't stay dead. Michael Afton, tragic until the very end, and possibly beyond. The puppet's purpose, Charlotte Emily's eternal guardianship. Among all the possessed animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's, the puppet stands apart, where the others hunt and kill. Driven by confusion and pain, the puppet protects and guides. Where others seem trapped by their possession, unable to escape the metal that binds them, the puppet demonstrates agency and purpose that suggests a different relationship with its animatronic body. This difference stems from who possesses it and why. Charlotte Emily, Henry's daughter, is widely understood to have been William Afton's first victim, though the exact sequence of early events remains somewhat debated. What we know from the game suggests that in the rain outside, a Freddy Fazbear's location, while other children played and celebrated inside, something locked the door, leaving young Charlie isolated and vulnerable. William seized this opportunity, murdering the child in a brief, brutal act that would catalyze everything that followed. The security puppet, a tall, thin animatronic designed specifically to watch over children during parties, had a direct connection to Charlotte through a green bracelet she wore. When Charlie was locked outside, the puppet detected the breach, the child moving beyond the safe boundaries of the building. It tried to reach her, navigating out into the rain, its mechanisms sparking and failing as water damaged its components. By the time the puppet crawled to Charlotte's body, it was too late. The rain had caused critical system failures. The animatronic collapsed beside the dead child, lying in the wet alley as its power drained away. But in that moment of proximity, as machinery failed and spirit detached from flesh, Charlotte's consciousness merged with the security puppet. This possession differs from the others in crucial ways. The missing children were murdered and then stuffed into animatronic suits, a forceful act that trapped their spirits inside machines. Charlotte wasn't placed in the puppet. She chose it, or her spirit gravitated toward it naturally, finding refuge in the guardian that had tried so desperately to reach her. This willing merger might explain the puppet's greater clarity and purpose. Where the other children seem confused, lashing out at anyone who reminds them of the man who killed them, Charlotte remembers. She knows who she is or was. She understands what happened to her and to the other children, and rather than simply seeking revenge, she takes on a protective role, attempting to prevent more deaths while also granting mercy to those already gone. The Give Gifts, Give Life minigame shows what many interpret as the puppet's most important act. Moving through a Freddy Fazbear's location, the puppet places masks onto the slumped bodies of dead children. The Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy masks appear to transform the lifeless victims into possessed animatronics, an act that could be interpreted as allowing their spirits to inhabit the machines rather than simply fading away or remaining trapped in their corpses. This sequence raises questions about how possession works in FNaF. The scene could suggest that spirits need someone or something to facilitate the connection to animatronics. Were the children's spirits simply wandering, unable to find peace, until Charlotte's intervention gave them vessels? Or would they have possessed the suits eventually regardless, with Charlotte simply expediting the process? Henry's speech in Pizzeria Simulator suggests the former. He describes being deceived, not understanding the first small wound that allowed the horrors to unfold. This small wound seems to be Charlotte's death and subsequent possession. By possessing the puppet, Charlotte demonstrated that death and possession were possible, that spirits could linger in the physical world through mechanical hosts. William then exploited this knowledge, deliberately murdering children and stuffing them into suits to create more possessions. If Charlotte hadn't possessed the puppet, would William have discovered the possession mechanics? Possibly not. He might have killed the 5 children anyway. Driven by whatever madness or motivation compelled his actions, but without seeing proof that spirits could inhabit machines, he might not have pursued the remnant experiments that defined his later crimes. This makes Charlotte inadvertently responsible for much of what followed, a horrible irony that Henry acknowledges in his speech. His daughter's death and possession taught William the possibility of synthetic immortality, inspiring decades of murders and experiments. The wound Henry couldn't prevent became the infection that spread through the entire timeline. Yet Charlotte's role throughout the series remains primarily protective rather than vengeful. The puppet appears in multiple games, often in contexts suggesting guardianship. In FNaF 2, the puppet rewards the player with cake in its minigame, celebrating completion rather than punishing failure. The music box mechanic, where the player must wind it to keep the puppet calm, creates tension, but also implies the puppet can be soothed, appeased, unlike the more aggressive animatronics. The Happiest Day minigame, one of FNaF's most emotionally resonant moments, shows the puppet's ultimate act of mercy. 6 children sit at a party table. 5 of them already wear masks: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. plus one that appears to be another Freddy, or possibly Fredbear. The sixth child, sitting alone at the end, receives a cake from the puppet. Then this child puts on a golden Freddy mask, joining the others as they all fade away, finally released from their earthly attachments. This scene represents Charlotte granting the other children what she never received, a proper birthday party, a moment of joy before passing on. The puppet doesn't fade with them. Charlotte remains, her purpose not yet fulfilled, continuing to watch over and protect, even as the children she saved finally find peace. Lefty, the animatronic from Pizzeria Simulator, was designed by Henry specifically to capture and contain the puppet. The name Lefty might be a simple designation based on having a functional left hand, or it might reference how this animatronic bears scars left by tragedy. Inside Lefty's frame, the puppet remains trapped, drawn in by the sound of a child's voice crying for help, unable to resist the call to protect. Henry's trap exploits Charlotte's protective instinct. She can't ignore a child in distress, even when that distress is artificially created bait. This vulnerability, her inability to abandon children in danger, allows Henry to gather all the animatronics together for the final fire. He uses his daughter's compassion against her, tricking her into the building that will become her pyre. The fire destroys the puppet, along with the others. Unlike the more vengeful spirits who arguably deserve release, Charlotte's burning feels more tragic. She wasn't seeking revenge or trapped by confusion. She was protecting others, trying to grant mercy, attempting to mitigate the damage William caused. Her destruction feels less like justice and more like necessary sacrifice. A good soul caught up in the purge required to cleanse everything Afton touched. But does the puppet truly end in that fire? Some theorists point to later games where music box themes recur, where tall, thin figures appear in backgrounds, where mysterious guardians seem to help the player. Could fragments of Charlotte persist, echoes of her protective nature continuing to influence events even after her animatronic body burned? The puppet's story also raises questions about Henry's role as a father. He created the security puppet to watch his daughter, but that system failed. The puppet couldn't prevent Charlotte's death, and in the end, Henry designed Lefty to exploit his dead daughter's compassion, using her protective instinct to trap her in a burning building. Did Henry know Charlotte possessed the puppet? His Pizzeria Simulator speech suggests he did, at least eventually. He acknowledges being deceived but also recognizing the wound's nature. Creating Lefty to capture his daughter demonstrates both understanding of her possession and willingness to sacrifice her for the greater goal of ending everything. This creates a painful parallel to William's relationship with his children. Both fathers sacrifice their children to their obsessions, William deliberately and Henry reluctantly, but both end with dead children and regret-filled fathers trying to justify their choices. Charlotte Emily deserved better. She deserved a childhood that wasn't cut short by a killer outside a pizzeria. She deserved a father who could protect her. She deserved friends who wouldn't end up murdered. She deserved a death that wasn't the catalyst for decades of horror. And in the end, she deserved a release that honored her protective nature rather than exploited it. The puppet represents FNaF's saddest possession, not because the death was more brutal or the spirit more tortured, but because Charlotte never stopped trying to help. She gave life to the other children. She granted them their happiest day. She responded to calls for help even when they were traps. Her tragedy isn't just that she died, but that her death taught others how to create more deaths, and her goodness became another tool for manipulation. In a franchise full of murdered children and possessed animatronics, the puppet stands as the guardian, the protector, the one who tried to make things better in a world determined to get worse. Charlotte Emily, first victim and last defender. Her music box melody a lullaby for souls who deserve better than mechanical prisons and birthday party nightmares. The puppet gave gifts and gave life. In return, she received only more sorrow, more vigil, more watching as the horrors multiplied. Her purpose was protection. Her reward was ashes. And if there's justice in the FNaF universe, it's that her final act, allowing herself to be captured so the fire could finally end the cycle, might have succeeded where all her protective efforts failed. Charlotte's music can finally stop. The puppet can rest. The guardian who never stopped guarding can, at last, find the peace she spent so long granting to others. Sister Location's timeline. When did it happen? Few games in the FNaF series have generated as much timeline debate as Sister Location. This underground facility, housing the fun-time animatronics and serving as the setting for Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, clearly occurs before some games and after others. But pinpointing exactly when in the chronology it takes place has proven remarkably difficult. The community has proposed multiple placements, each with compelling evidence and frustrating contradictions. The game itself provides limited direct dating. We play as Michael Afton, confirmed through the post-completion monologue where he speaks about finding his sister and his father. Michael appears to have been sent by William to this facility for reasons that seem to involve freeing Elizabeth from Circus Baby. This much the community generally accepts, but when exactly this mission occurs remains hotly debated. One major timeline placement puts Sister Location before FNaF 1, potentially even before FNaF 2. This interpretation suggests that Michael's journey through Fazbear locations begins with Sister Location, where he descends into his father's underground facility and encounters the fun-time animatronics. The scooper hollows him out. Ennard uses his body as a disguise. And eventually, Michael's corpse reanimates thanks to Remnant. Evidence supporting this early placement includes Michael's physical state in subsequent games. If Sister Location occurred first, Michael's undead condition would explain how he survives working at locations where animatronics regularly kill normal humans. The FNaF One Night Guard seemingly shrugs off being stuffed into a suit in the game over screen, returning night after night despite fatal injuries. If Mike Schmidt is Michael post-scooping, his supernatural durability makes sense. The survival logbook, used by Michael seemingly during or after FNaF 1, shows him drawing Nightmare Fredbear and referencing exotic butters, an item received in Sister Location. If Michael owned this logbook during FNaF 1, and it contains Sister Location references, that suggests Sister Location occurred before FNaF 1 in the timeline. Additionally, Michael's mission to free Elizabeth implies she's already been trapped in Baby for some time. Elizabeth died when Circus Baby's Pizza World opened, and she was pulled into Baby's storage tank. That location closed immediately after her death, with the fun-time animatronics being relocated to the underground rental facility. For Michael to be sent to free her, there must be enough time for William to discover what happened, formulate a plan, and send his son into the facility. However, the FNaF 1 placement creates problems. The withered animatronics in the FNaF 1 location are stated to have been used for parts, which explains their deteriorated condition. But if those parts went into the fun-time animatronics, as suggested by the blueprint showing remnant injection via the scooper, how could Sister Location occur before FNaF 1 when the animatronics supposedly haven't been dismantled yet. This leads to the alternative placement, sister location between FNaF 1 and FNaF 3. In this timeline, Michael works at the FNaF 1 location, experiences the events of that game, and then gets sent by William to the underground facility. After being scooped and reanimating, Michael continues his journey, eventually arriving at Fazbear's Fright. Supporting this placement, we have William's apparent knowledge that the facility will be dangerous for Michael. The entire setup, from the automated announcements to the fun time mechanics, suggests William designed this as a test or trap for his son. Why would William send Michael if not as punishment or training? And what would Michael need punishment or training for unless he'd already done something that required consequences? The FNaF 1 placement suggests Michael earned this mission by working at Freddy's, perhaps failing to discover what his father wanted him to find at that location, necessitating a more direct intervention at the underground facility. After sister location, Michael's declaration that he's going to find William drives him to work at Fazbear's Fright, where Springtrap can be found. But this timeline also faces contradictions. If the remnant injection happened after FNaF 1, how did Michael survive that game's events without supernatural durability? Normal humans don't last 5 nights against possessed animatronics actively trying to kill them. Michael's survival implies he's already something more than human, which the pre-FNaF 1 sister location placement explains better. Another proposed timeline puts sister location even earlier, before the missing children incident of 1985. In this interpretation, William murders Charlotte in 83, discovers possession through her haunting the puppet, creates the fun-time animatronics as deliberate child-catching machines, and uses them to murder more children before the missing children incident officially occurs. This early placement would make Elizabeth's death occur before the missing children incident, with the fun-time animatronics being infused with remnant from victims we never see named or identified. When William later murders Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy, he's already experienced with possession mechanics, having learned from Charlotte and experimented with the fun times. The problem with this ultra-early placement is Michael's involvement. If sister location occurs in the early 1980s, Michael would still be relatively young, the teenager or young adult who killed his brother in 83. Would William send his son into the facility immediately after the crying child's death? Possible, but it seems rushed. Some theorists have proposed that Michael visits the sister location facility multiple times, creating a timeline where the game's events don't all occur during a single 5-night period. Perhaps Michael first enters the facility in the early timeline, experiences some events, and returns later after FNaF 1 or 2 to complete the rest. This would explain how evidence seems to support multiple contradictory placements. They're all partially correct because Michael's sister location experiences span years. The Night 5 custom night segment seems to support this interpretation. The rare screens and context suggest that these later nights might not be consecutive with the main nights, that they occur separately with different stakes and circumstances. If so, the sister location we play through might be a condensed representation of events that actually unfolded across the timeline. Another factor complicating the timeline is the blueprints and schematics shown in sister location. These documents reference multiple animatronic generations, showing design evolution and testing protocols. The documents seem to depict a facility that's been operating for years, conducting experiments and rentals over an extended period. This suggests sister location isn't a short-term operation, but rather a long-running project of Williams. If the facility operated continuously from the early 1980s through the mid-90s, multiple visits by Michael make more sense. He might have been sent there as a teenager, then returned as an adult, with the game showing us representative nights from different periods, rather than one consecutive week. The rental service aspect of Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals adds another layer. These animatronics were designed to be rented out for private parties, meaning they existed and operated in the public for some period. When did this rental service begin and end? Before the missing children incident seems likely, given William's interest in perfecting his murder methods, but the rentals could have continued afterward as well. Elizabeth's death during a private demonstration, not at a public location, suggests the rentals might not have operated extensively before the tragedy shut everything down. But the infrastructure, the underground facility, the blueprints and systems, all indicate long-term planning and operation beyond just one tragic incident. The recent releases haven't clarified sister location's placement as much as some fans hoped. The timeline remains contested, with different theorists emphasizing different evidence to support their preferred order. What seems clear is that sister location occurs after Elizabeth's death, since that's Michael's mission, and before Michael's declaration of intent to find William, since that appears in the ending. Beyond those boundaries, the exact placement shifts depending on how you interpret the remnant mechanics, Michael's undead status, William's motivations, and the purpose of the facility itself. Each placement answers some questions while creating new ones, maintaining FNaF's tradition of solving one mystery by introducing 3 more. Perhaps the timeline ambiguity is deliberate. Sister location was designed to be disorienting, to leave players uncertain and off balance. The unreliable narration, the shifting announcements, the facility's labyrinthine layout, all contribute to a sense that normal rules don't apply here. Expecting it to slot neatly into the timeline might be missing the point. Or perhaps we simply don't have enough information yet. Future games or books might provide the missing piece that suddenly makes sister location's placement obvious. FNaF has a history of retroactively clarifying or completely overturning previously accepted timeline positions. For now, most timeline attempts place sister location either before FNaF 1 or between FNaF 1 and FNaF 3, with the former having slightly more community support due to the survival logbook evidence and Michael's undead durability. But significant populations argue for the latter, or even more extreme placements. What we can say with certainty is that sister location occurred, that Michael was scooped, that he survived as a walking corpse, and that this experience shaped his subsequent actions throughout the timeline. The exact when matters less than the what and why. The understanding that Michael's journey through Fazbear's locations was driven by guilt, family obligation, and eventually a determination to stop his father's horrors. Sister location's place in the timeline might remain uncertain, but its place in Michael's character arc, descending into an underground hell and emerging as something no longer quite human, that's clear regardless of when it happened. Some journeys transform you. Sister location's 5 nights transformed Michael from son to sacrifice, from human to remnant-sustained corpse, from brother seeking redemption to hunter pursuing his father through shadows and flame. Remnant, agony, and the shadow animatronics. The supernatural elements in 5 Nights at Freddy's, how spirits possess machines, how consciousness persists beyond death, how emotions can literally reshape reality, rest on 2 fundamental forces, remnant and agony. Understanding these concepts helps unlock some of FNaF's deepest mysteries. Though like everything in this franchise, the more you learn, the more questions emerge. Remnant appears first in the sister location blueprints, specifically the schematics for the scooper. This device, designed to remove endoskeletons from animatronic shells, has a secondary function. A tank beneath the scooper contains remnant, and the upper mechanism serves as an injector, allowing this substance to be inserted into animatronics or other targets. But what is remnant? The Fazbear Frights books provide our clearest explanation. Remnant is molten metal infused with human memories and emotions, particularly those associated with trauma and death. When someone dies with strong emotional attachments, when consciousness fights against its ending, something of that person's essence can bind to nearby metal, heat the metal without overheating it, and you create remnant, a liquid that preserves consciousness and memory in physical form. William Afton appears to have discovered remnant through experimentation. After murdering the children and witnessing their spirits possess the animatronics, evidence suggests he realized that consciousness could be preserved in mechanical form. Based on what we see in later games and understand from supplementary materials, he seems to have dismantled the possessed animatronics and melted their metal components, extracting remnant that contained fragments of the children's spirits. This remnant could then be injected into other machines, spreading the possession or creating new haunted animatronics. The Funtime animatronics were infused with remnant extracted from the classic animatronics, explaining why they demonstrate awareness and supernatural abilities despite being newer models. The scooper injected this stolen essence into Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Foxy, creating vessels that contain pieces of murdered children's spirits alongside the animatronic's own personalities. Remnant also explains Michael Afton's survival as a walking corpse. When Ennard, an amalgamation containing the combined remnant from all the Funtime animatronics, used Michael's body as a skin suit, remnant leaked into his system. After Ennard evacuated, leaving Michael's body to rot in the sewers, the remnant kept Michael's consciousness bound to his decomposing flesh. He became an undead, sustained not by biology, but by supernatural metals coursing through what remained of his circulatory system. The properties of remnant explain several otherwise inexplicable elements of FNaF lore. How spirits remain bound to animatronics for decades. How destroying animatronics doesn't automatically free the spirits. Why heating the remnant through fire becomes necessary to truly release possessed entities. Remnant is the glue holding spirits to the physical world, and only sufficient heat can break those bonds. But remnant has a darker cousin, agony, where remnant represents the preservation of consciousness and memory. Agony represents the crystallization of pain and suffering into a force that can affect the physical world. Agony doesn't require death or direct contact with metal. Strong enough negative emotion, sustained trauma, repeated suffering. These create agony that can infuse objects, locations, even the air itself. The Fazbear Frights books explore agony extensively. Objects near traumatic events absorb the pain, becoming conduits for that suffering. A necklace worn during a terrible experience. A toy present during abuse. A room where someone died in terror. These items collect agony, and that agony can manifest supernatural effects, creating phenomena that mimic possession, but stem from pure emotional residue rather than actual spirits. Agony explains events where animatronics behave as if possessed despite no confirmed spirits inside them. The emotional weight of Fazbear locations, decades of children's fear and workers' dread, creates an atmosphere so saturated with agony that machines can become active simply from environmental exposure. They're not haunted by specific spirits. They're animated by accumulated suffering. The distinction matters. Remnant-based possession involves actual consciousness, the murdered children's awareness continuing through their mechanical hosts. Agony-based animation creates behavior that seems intelligent but stems from emotion imprinted on physical space rather than true sentience. Remnant is personal. Agony is environmental. Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie present what many theorists interpret as potential agony manifestations rather than traditional possessions. These dark entities appear throughout the series without clear origin stories or direct connections to name victims. They're not on the gravestone list. They don't seem to be murdered children. Based on how they function in the games and what we understand about agony from the books, some theorists propose they could be condensed agony, shadows given form by the overwhelming negativity associated with Freddy and Bonnie, the locations, the events, the years of horror. Shadow Freddy appears to help William lure the animatronics back to the safe room for dismantling, acting as a tool or manifestation of William's will. Shadow Bonnie crashes games and appears in minigames without clear purpose. Both exist in ambiguous moral space, neither clearly antagonistic nor helpful, simply present as embodiments of pain. The AR game's dark remnant mechanic supports the agony interpretation. Collecting too much dark remnant tainted by negative emotion, summons Shadow Bonnie. This suggests that darkness, negativity, and suffering can corrupt remnant, creating shadow entities that exist between traditional possession and environmental haunting. Understanding remnant and agony as distinct but related forces helps explain the variable behavior of FNaF's supernatural elements. Some animatronics act with clear purpose and personality because remnant preserves specific children's consciousness. Others thrash and attack without apparent intelligence because agony animates them without providing true awareness. And some locations feel haunted even when no spirits are present, because decades of trauma have saturated every surface with absorbed suffering. The mechanics also explain why fire works as a solution. High temperatures neutralize remnant, breaking the bonds that keep consciousness attached to metal. Fire also cleanses agony, burning away accumulated negativity and resetting locations to neutral states. This is why Henry's plan in Pizzeria Simulator involves a controlled blaze, the heat simultaneously destroying the possessed animatronics and purging the agony that permeates Fazbear Entertainment's legacy. However, complete destruction proves difficult. Remnants scattered across multiple objects requires burning all of them. Agony embedded in a large location might need the entire structure razed. And as we see with William Afton, some remnant concentrations resist even extreme heat, requiring multiple attempts to finally neutralize. The concept of remnant and agony as quasi-physical forces rather than purely spiritual phenomena fits FNaF's tone. This isn't a universe where ghosts work according to traditional supernatural rules. The paranormal has mechanics, can be studied, manipulated, weaponized. William Afton didn't just stumble onto possession. He turned it into a science, developing procedures to extract, refine, and inject remnant with industrial precision. This scientific approach to the supernatural creates disturbing implications. If remnant can be manufactured by creating trauma and extracting the resulting essence, what limits exist on who might pursue such research? Fazbear Entertainment's callous disregard for safety suggests they might continue remnant experimentation if it proved profitable. Other entities could discover the same techniques, spawning an industry of deliberate suffering for supernatural product. The mimic's relationship to agony adds another dimension. This animatronic taught violence through Edwin's abuse seems to generate and spread agony wherever it goes. Each murder creates more trauma. Each traumatic event leaves agony residue. The mimic becomes a self-sustaining agony engine, producing the very force that potentially powers its continued existence. Some theories propose that the mimic runs on agony rather than electricity, that its endoskeleton absorbs suffering and uses that energy to maintain function. This would explain its persistence despite being entombed in concrete, its ability to continue operating without obvious power sources, its attraction to locations saturated with trauma. The relationship between remnant and agony remains incompletely understood. They clearly interact. Remnant can be corrupted by agony, creating dark remnant. Agony can preserve or enhance remnant effects. But are they truly separate substances, or different aspects of the same phenomenon? Does remnant infused with positive emotions create different effects than remnant saturated with pain? Charlotte's remnant should theoretically differ from the murdered children's, since she chose her possession and serves protective purposes rather than vengeful ones. Does her remnant carry that intention, that love for other children? When the FNaF animatronics received remnant injections, did they receive different personality fragments depending on which child's essence they contained? These questions remain unanswered, leaving theorists to speculate about remnants' full properties and potential. The substance clearly preserves more than just consciousness. It retains emotional states, personal characteristics, potentially even moral frameworks. William's remnant-sustained existence maintains his cruelty. Michael's maintains his determination. The children's maintains their innocence corrupted by trauma. Agony's properties seem more consistent, uniformly negative, feeding on suffering and producing more of the same in self-perpetuating cycles. Objects infused with agony don't carry individual personality. They simply radiate bad vibes, causing fear, discomfort, malfunction in nearby systems. Agony is pollution, contamination that spreads until cleansed. The shadow animatronics serve as agony's most visible manifestation. Dark reflections of Freddy and Bonnie, born from all the pain associated with those characters and forms. If Shadow Freddy appears during the animatronic dismantling, it's because that moment concentrates enormous agony. William destroying the children's vessels while their spirits watch helplessly. That trauma crystallizes into a shadow that can then be perceived and interacted with. Similarly, Shadow Bonnie's appearances often occur during minigames depicting tragic events, or in locations associated with suffering. The toy animatronic's destruction, the bite incidents, the murders, all leave agony deposits that might manifest as shadow entities, temporarily taking familiar forms. As FNaF continues expanding, remnant and agony will likely remain central to explaining its supernatural mechanics. These aren't arbitrary ghost rules that change based on plot convenience. They're consistent systems that create specific effects under specific conditions. Understanding remnant and agony helps us understand why spirits behave as they do, why some animatronics are more dangerous than others, why fire serves as the ultimate solution, and why trauma echoes through decades. In the end, remnant and agony represent FNaF's approach to horror, tragedy made tangible, emotion rendered into substance, pain that refuses to dissipate until forcefully purged. The murdered children don't just haunt animatronics in some vague supernatural sense. They're literally part of the metal now, their consciousness preserved in liquid form, and their suffering crystallized into dark energy that contaminates everything it touches. Remnant and agony make the horror permanent, transforming one-time tragedies into ongoing contamination that spreads and persists. Until someone applies enough heat to burn it all away, the remnant keeps spirits bound, the agony keeps accumulating, and the cycle continues feeding on itself. Vanessa, Vanny, and the Patient 46. Mystery Security Breach introduced players to Vanessa, a security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, who seems helpful at first before revealing darker motives. But Vanessa's story proved far more complex than a simple antagonist. Who is she? What happened to her? How does she connect to Vanny, the knife-wielding, rabbit-suited killer stalking Gregory through the Pizzaplex? And what's the deal with Patient 46, the mysterious individual receiving therapy in the hidden CDs? Vanessa appears to be a normal adult woman working security at the Pizzaplex, concerned about Gregory's presence in the building after hours and attempting to locate him. Her radio communications suggest professional concern for a lost child, but her behavior grows increasingly suspicious as the night progresses, and in certain endings, she's revealed to be hunting Gregory rather than trying to help him. Vanny, meanwhile, is explicitly hostile, wearing a homemade rabbit costume with patchwork fur and a sinister mask, pursuing Gregory with murderous intent. The community initially assumed Vanessa and Vanny were different people, two separate threats Gregory needed to avoid. But evidence quickly mounted suggesting they're the same person. Vanessa transformed into Vanny through Glitchtrap's influence. The help-wanted VR game established Glitchtrap's ability to possess or control human minds. Vanessa worked as a beta tester for that game, assembling Tape Girl's hidden recordings that inadvertently allowed Glitchtrap to merge with her consciousness. The Curse of Dreadbear DLC showed Vanessa creating the Vanny mask in a hidden cellar, crafting the costume that would become her alternate identity. Emails and communications in later games reveal Vanessa's behavior changing after her Glitchtrap exposure. She begins acting erratically, showing up in places she shouldn't, making suspicious queries in the Fazbear database. The virus spreading through Vanessa's mind transforms her from beta tester into accomplice, creating the Vanny personality that serves Glitchtrap's goals. But the relationship between Vanessa and Vanny remains ambiguous. Are they fully separate personalities? A dissociative split, where Vanessa doesn't know what Vanny does? Or is Vanessa aware but powerless, forced to watch her body commit murders she doesn't want? The Princess Quest endings suggest Vanessa fighting back against Glitchtrap's control, attempting to free herself from the digital entity's influence. This is where Patient 46 enters the picture, creating one of Security Breach's most debated mysteries. Hidden throughout the Pizzaplex are therapy session CDs, recordings of a therapist named Dr. Garrett meeting with a patient whose identity remains concealed. The patient shows signs of manipulation, hacking, and violence, ultimately killing multiple therapists who get too close to uncovering their secrets. Initially, the community assumed Patient 46 was Vanessa. The timing made sense. The behavior matched Glitchtrap's manipulation, and having Vanessa undergo therapy for her deteriorating mental state fit the narrative. But as people analyzed the CDs more carefully, contradictions emerged. The therapist notes describe Patient 46 as having great parents and a great childhood, details that don't match what we learn about Vanessa's background from other therapy CDs. Vanessa had a troubled childhood, caught between divorced parents, manipulated by her father Bill into lying for him. The descriptions don't align. Additionally, some therapy sessions reference patient 46 drawing pictures and requiring simple communication methods, behaviors more consistent with a child than an adult. This observation led to a shocking theory. Patient 46 isn't Vanessa. Patient 46 is Gregory. The Tales from the Pizzaplex story, GGY, strongly suggests this interpretation. The story follows a boy named Gregory who appears to have been compromised by Glitchtrap and turned into what could be described as a sleeper agent, using his technical skills to manipulate Pizzaplex systems and eliminate anyone who discovered the conspiracy. This Gregory had normal parents, good grades, friends at school, details that align with the great childhood described in the therapy CDs. If this interpretation is correct and Gregory is patient 46, it would explain his advanced technical abilities in security breach, why he can repair Glamrock Freddy and hack security systems, why he knows the Pizzaplex layout so well. He's been there before, many times, working under Glitchtrap's influence to prepare the location for whatever scheme the digital entity planned. But this creates a new mystery. If Gregory is patient 46, then who do the Vanessa therapy CDs belong to? The CDs that discuss her troubled childhood and manipulation by her father. Those can't be patient 46's sessions if 46 is Gregory. Some theorists propose there are 3 separate patients across the CDs. Patient 46, Gregory. Patient 71, Vanessa. And possibly others whose numbers we haven't identified. Each therapist might have worked with multiple patients, with a CD scattered throughout the Pizzaplex, representing sessions from different people at different times. This interpretation requires carefully categorizing each CD, determining which patient the session discusses based on details mentioned. It's complicated, potentially overcomplicated, but it reconciles the contradictory evidence by admitting that not all the therapy recordings belong to the same person. The alternative is that some information in the CDs is deliberately false. Misdirection planted by Glitchtrap or the patients themselves to confuse anyone who found the recordings. Therapy notes mentioning great parents might be Gregory lying to his therapist, concealing his actual situation. References to childhood trauma might be Vanessa's truth mixed with Gregory's fiction. Vanessa's motivation throughout security breach remains murky. Why does she want to capture or kill Gregory? Is it Glitchtrap's command, the digital entity ordering its human puppet to eliminate a threat? Is it Vanny's twisted desire, a personality that enjoys hunting? Or is it something else? Perhaps an attempt to save Gregory by forcing him back under Glitchtrap's control, where he'll stop causing problems. The Vanessa we see in the Princess Quest endings, freed from Glitchtrap and sharing ice cream with Gregory and Glamrock Freddy, seems genuinely relieved and peaceful. This suggests the real Vanessa never wanted to hurt anyone, that Vanny was always a forced identity created by external manipulation. Once the manipulation broke, Vanessa returned to herself. But the ease of this recovery raises questions. Can possession or mind control really be broken so simply? Does completing a video game arcade machine truly sever Glitchtrap's connection? Or is Vanessa still compromised, with Vanny lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to re-emerge? Some theorists don't trust the Princess Quest ending, suggesting it might be a hallucination or false victory. Gregory and Vanessa getting ice cream together seems too clean, too happy for a franchise built on tragic cycles. Could this ending represent what Gregory hopes will happen, rather than what actually occurs? The Ruin DLC added complexity by showing the Pizzaplex abandoned months after security breaches events. Where are Gregory and Vanessa? Why did they leave Glamrock Freddy behind? What happened to make them disappear? These questions suggest the Princess Quest ending might not be as definitive as it initially appeared. Vanessa's role in future FNaF stories remains uncertain. Is she free and living a normal life with Gregory? Is she still compromised by Glitchtrap fragments? Did she die in the Pizzaplex, with the freed Vanessa in the ending being a different kind of escape? Without explicit confirmation, all possibilities remain on the table. The Patient 46 mystery, meanwhile, has shifted from who is it to what does it mean? If Gregory was hacked by Glitchtrap and turned into a tool, how did he break free? What triggered his escape from the Pizzaplex on the night security breach occurs? Why does he no longer seem under Glitchtrap's control, despite previously being the perfect sleeper agent? Some theories suggest Gregory wasn't trying to escape Glitchtrap. He was trying to complete a mission, accessing something in the underground ruins or sabotaging the Pizzaplex in some way. The burn trap encounter in the original ending might have been Gregory's true goal, leading the player to William Afton's remains so something specific could occur. Other theories propose Gregory experienced a glitch or system error that temporarily freed him from control, creating a window of opportunity where he could act according to his own will, rather than Glitchtrap's programming. This would explain his desperate attempts to escape and survive. He knows the control might reassert at any moment. Vanessa and Vanny, Gregory and Patient 46, all these identities blur together in security breaches' deliberately confusing narrative. The game wanted players uncertain about who to trust, whether the security guard was friend or foe, whether the lost child was victim or accomplice. That uncertainty creates tension, but also frustration when trying to establish concrete facts about these characters. As FNaF continues, we'll likely learn more about Vanessa and Gregory's fates, whether they truly escaped Glitchtrap's influence or simply entered a new phase of his plan. The Help Wanted 2 ending suggests Glitchtrap might be permanently deleted, but FNaF has taught us not to trust any death as final. Digital entities can fragment, hide, resurrect themselves from backup code. For now, Vanessa represents FNaF's exploration of mind control and identity, how outside forces can corrupt someone into committing acts they'd never choose freely. Vanny is the manifestation of that corruption, a personality built from external manipulation rather than internal desire. And Patient 46, regardless of whether it's Gregory or someone else, demonstrates how Glitchtrap's influence extends beyond single targets, creating networks of compromised individuals working toward goals they might not fully understand. In a franchise about possessed animatronics and murdered children, Vanessa and Gregory's story feels disturbingly modern. Digital possession through VR exposure, hacking human minds like software, creating sleeper agents through psychological manipulation. The horror shifted from mechanical monsters to invisible viruses that turn victims into weapons while leaving their appearance unchanged. Vanessa might look like a normal security guard. Gregory might look like a normal child. But Security Breach asks us to consider what normal means when consciousness can be overwritten, when identity becomes fluid, when the person we see might be a puppet for something wearing their face as a mask. Conclusion: the beauty of uncertainty. We've wandered through Golden Freddy's multiple souls, debated which bite matters more, questioned whether Gregory is human, examined the mimic's connection to Glitchtrap, counted and recounted missing children, followed Michael's tragic arc, understood Charlotte's eternal guardianship, placed sister locations somewhere in the timeline, decoded remnant and agony, and investigated Vanessa's transformation into Vanny. Along the way, we've encountered more questions than answers, and that's exactly how FNaF works. This franchise has thrived for over a decade, not by providing clear, definitive solutions, but by creating mysteries that spawn theories, that generate discussions, that build communities. The uncertainty isn't a bug, it's the feature. The ambiguity isn't Scott Cawthon or Steelwool Studios being unclear. It's them understanding that sometimes the search for answers matters more than finding them. Consider how much time, energy, and creativity the FNaF community has invested in theory crafting. Thousands of videos analyzing evidence, millions of forum posts debating interpretations, countless hours spent examining screenshots, decoding ciphers, connecting dots across games and books. This collective effort represents something beautiful. People coming together around shared curiosity, building knowledge cooperatively, respecting different perspectives while arguing passionately for their own. If FNaF revealed every answer definitively, that community activity would diminish. Theories would become obsolete. Debates would end. The living, breathing ecosystem of investigation and speculation that makes FNaF unique would die, replaced by simple acceptance of confirmed facts. The uncertainty preserves engagement. Each new game or book doesn't just add to the story, it recontextualizes everything that came before. Details that seemed insignificant become crucial. Theories that seemed ridiculous become plausible. The timeline shifts. Character identities evolve. What we thought we knew proves incomplete. This creates frustration, absolutely. People who prefer straightforward narratives find FNaF exhausting. The constant reinterpretation, the lack of solid ground, the feeling that nothing is ever truly settled. It can feel like chasing a target that deliberately moves whenever you get close. But for those who embrace the mystery, who find joy in the investigation, rather than just the solution, FNaF offers endless exploration. You're never done with FNaF. You're never finished understanding it. There's always another detail to examine, another connection to draw, another theory to consider. The questions we've explored tonight might never receive definitive answers. Golden Freddy might remain ambiguous. The bites might blur together. Gregory's nature might stay uncertain. The Mimic and Glitchtrap's relationship might never be explicitly confirmed. The exact child count might vary depending on how you measure. And that's okay. These mysteries have value beyond their solutions. They teach us to analyze evidence carefully, to consider multiple perspectives, to build arguments and accept when others find different conclusions equally valid. They remind us that reality itself often works this way, complex, ambiguous, resistant to simple categorization. FNaF theories also preserve the horror. Definitive answers reduce fear. Once you fully understand something, it becomes less frightening. The unknown is inherently scarier than the known. By keeping crucial details unclear, FNaF maintains its atmosphere of dread. Those animatronics remain unsettling because we're never quite sure what drives them, what they want, whether they can be reasoned with or escaped from. The theories we've discussed tonight represent the community's best efforts to understand FNaF's narrative using evidence available as of early 2026. Future releases will add to this evidence, supporting some theories while undermining others. The discourse will continue evolving, as it always has, adapting to new information while preserving the core questions that make this franchise endlessly fascinating. So are these theories true? Some are, probably. Others might be completely wrong. Many likely contain partial truths mixed with misinterpretations, but their truth value matters less than their function, as frameworks for understanding, as tools for engaging with the material, as shared language the community uses to discuss this wonderfully complex narrative. The beauty of FNaF theories isn't in being right. It's in the journey of investigation, the satisfaction of finding a new connection, the delight of sharing your interpretation with others who care as deeply about these mechanical horrors and family tragedies as you do. As we close tonight's exploration, remember that uncertainty isn't the enemy of understanding. Sometimes the questions we ask reveal more than the answers we find. Sometimes the search itself provides the satisfaction we were seeking all along. Thank you for drifting through these theories with me. If you enjoyed this deep dive into FNaF's greatest mysteries, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if this kind of slow, immersive speculation feels right for you, and let me know in the comments which theory you find most compelling, which mysteries you're most eager to see solved or left deliberately ambiguous. Until next time, sleep well. Dream of golden bears and purple shadows, of children who deserve better and fathers who failed them, of questions that refuse easy answers and mysteries that make the darkness a little more bearable. The theories continue, the speculation never ends, and somewhere, Scott Cawthon smiles, knowing that the conversation he started with a simple indie horror game has grown into something that outlives any single answer he could provide. The mysteries remain, and that's exactly perfect.